all the time, but just in case, as Gil was mentioning, thank goodness they don't see this.
Yeah.
Doesn't appear that this fire could be spreading and that there are buildings that could be in the area as well. Then that's something that would be of concern, I would think, to fire personnel.
We have Carter Evans on the line right now. Carter's back with us. Carter is right on scene, as he has been all day, right in the middle of this. Carter, what's the latest?
Well, I understand that the fire department is on the way here right now, and the mood here has calmed just a bit. The tension is gone down just a couple of notches, but I'll tell you, we're all just standing here watching this cabin burning, and I do still see officers with their guns pointed at it. No one is letting their guard down just yet. Now, we have heard a lot of the ammunition that was inside that cabin going off, and actually I'm looking right now as our first fire trucks are beginning to arrive on scene and get instructions from the authorities who are here on how they should proceed on this. But again, I was telling you, I could hear some of the ammunition exploding inside that cabin in the fire, and very early on, when the fire was just starting, we did hear one gunshot. Now, no one knows for sure, of course, and we normally don't report on speculation, but the speculation among the authorities who are here on the scene is that perhaps that gunshot could have been a self-inflicted gunshot by the person, allegedly Dorner, who is inside that building, and we have not seen or heard any movement since this fire began coming from that building.
And you know what, Carter? I don't think that is far-fetched at all. There have been so many scenarios when you talk to people that are involved in law enforcement, the military, people even that follow crime novels. That's just how I'm going to put it out there. There have been so many scenarios discussed as to what could possibly happen, what could be on the mind of Christopher Dorner, taking from a lot of the paragraphs that he wrote in that at least 10-page manifesto. If you can take things from that, and I'm sure they've had so many different forensic and psychologists looking and trying to read between the lines or read between the words that Dorner wrote as to how this was going to go down. He said he didn't expect to be taken alive, or he didn't expect to come out of this alive. So that's certainly not out of just the possibilities that you have talked about. That's very, very real, Carter. And again, I've heard over the last couple of days, especially even earlier today, that could possibly be a scenario, and a strong scenario.
Right. So the latest now with these fire trucks that have just arrived on scene, they arrived with their lights flashing, and they stopped about where we are, about 100 yards away from the burning cabin right now. And the SWAT officers told them to turn off their flashing lights and to hold steady where they are. So they are not approaching this burning building just yet. And again, I'm looking at the SWAT officers who have eyes on the buildings, and they do still have their guns drawn, pointed at that building. So again, it doesn't appear that they have deemed this a safe enough scene for firefighters to enter at this point, but they are here standing at the ready.
Well, Carter, give us an idea of how far along that building is as far as destruction of the building.
You know, it's hard for me to see the actual structure itself because I'm looking at just a wall of orange as this entire building is engulfed in flames. And I know you were looking at some video from the helicopter a little while ago. I have also emailed some video from the ground into you, so by the time that makes it there, you'll be able to get a closer look at this. But what we're seeing now is, again, just this building completely engulfed in flames, still surrounded by SWAT officers with their guns drawn, and the fire department here, again, standing at the ready to move in. But as far as the building itself, completely engulfed right now.
And Carter, I do know we have something from you right now. If it's queued up, let's go ahead and take a look at the latest thing that Carter sent. I'm not sure if it's pictures of the building or some sound with some folks on the scene up there.
Authorities have told us we need to stay low for our safety. Moments ago, we were caught in the middle of this gunfire between Christopher Dorner and authorities. We're told that 2 deputies have been hit by that gunfire. Their condition unknown right now. But take a look on the other side of the land. You can see police. You can see the SWAT team just a little bit down the road. They've got Dorner cornered in a cabin right now. They're preparing to move in, but it is unknown exactly how they are going to go about that at this point. Time is on authorities' side. They have shot some tear gas inside the building, and we haven't heard any gunfire for some time.
200 feet ahead of us right here. We see a lot of these inquiries being moving to cover themselves. hear some screaming. You heard all that gun.
George, you got your heavy vest?
Yeah, I do.
You gonna use it?
No.
Once again, that's what Carter Evans was in the middle of earlier, that huge gun battle in which dozens and dozens and dozens of rounds were exchanged between officers and the person inside that burning cabin that you're looking at right in the middle of your screen.
And that was about 4 hours ago.
Oh, yeah, quite a while ago. Being held back by the officers who were on the front lines, correct?
Yes, and I'm now at a position where I can get a better look at this building, and it is falling apart. I can see the studs in the walls. I can see the framing, so in between the flames. So we're looking at a destruction of this building at this point. And again, the fire department is being held back about 100 yards from the building, the burning building. Again, it's not deemed safe enough for them to move in yet. The firefighters are standing in their truck behind the open doors for cover, and they were instructed to turn their lights off so as not to draw any attention by anyone who may still be alive inside that building.
You know what, Carter, not asking you to go out on a limb here, but then again, we're sitting here with reports, and we've depended a lot on your firsthand reports. If that building is burning like you say it is, you just imagine that if anybody was in there alive, they would have come out by now.
Yeah, or you would have heard something. And we didn't hear anything coming from inside that building other than the ammunition inside exploding. We didn't hear any screaming. We didn't hear any yelling. But we did hear that one gunshot early on when this fire had just started. And again, the speculation around here was that that shot may have been a self-inflicted gunshot. For the person inside was firing. That is the speculation among deputies here. Of course, no one knows for sure, but that seems to be a reasonable assumption at this point. And actually, if I'm listening in the background right now, I can hear a lot more of that ammunition exploding.
And Carter, you've confirmed from deputies in that area that at that particular time when that fire had just erupted that no deputies on scene had fired a shot at that given moment?
Well, you know, yes, as far as we know, no shots had been fired. Now, just moments before this fire started, I did hear several tear gas canisters fired into the building. And I asked the deputies, I said, do we know how this fire started yet? Did it start from within the building, or did it start from those tear gas canisters that were fired at the building? And they said it's unknown at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Carter, we do have your exclusive video that you shot of this cabin on fire. And can you see the pictures?
I
Do you have a monitor?
The pictures right now.
Okay.
I can't see the pictures, but what you're looking at are about 5 minutes or so into this fire as the flames were starting to grow and surround this cabin. And you can see the SWAT officers standing, watching, essentially, unable to do anything, unable to move in, unable to do anything but observe the fire as it burns. Again, their safety still of paramount importance. They've got to watch out, you know, and make sure that no one has gotten out of this building, maybe round to one side where they're undercover. They don't want to expose themselves until they're absolutely sure that there is no more threat from within or around this building.
Well, for you not to have a monitor out there, you certainly described it exactly as we're looking at it. We see the SWAT officers actually watching this building just go up in flames, go up in smoke. And again, don't want to have you speculate, but that's basically, people have their own hypotheses, and we heard something earlier, a report that one of our other reporters was given. Obviously, we don't know if it was official or not, about footsteps or possibly tracks leading away from this cabin, and that this person, presumably Dorner, could have made his way to a horse corral.
Yes, and, you know, there's always a concern that could be the case. Although I will tell you, there are a lot of footprints in the snow around here from some of these SWAT teams that have been moving around, getting into position. So it would be hard to tell who those footsteps may have been from. But, of course, that is a concern out here, and that's why you don't see the fire department moving in to extinguish this fire. That's why you see SWAT officers holding their position, standing at the ready, because it is still unclear at this point if the threat is over.
All right, Carter, since you have direct eyeballs on that cabin, on that building, we certainly have a picture of it from Sky 2, Sky 9. Tell us exactly how far along this fire is, how much longer you think this fire might stay burning.
Well, you know, I can hear some of the munitions, some more of the munitions burning, so I can tell, or exploding, so I can tell that the fire, from the sound of it, is getting deeper inside the building. From what I can see right now from my vantage point is just a wall of flames. And if I look into the flames, I can see some of the structure, the internal structure of the building, the studs, the framing. So at this point, this cabin is fully engulfed. I can only imagine and speculate that it would be impossible for anyone inside that cabin to survive flames this intense.
It's interesting when you say the number of rounds of ammunition that have gone up. It really sounds like there was quite a bit, or quite a lot inside that particular cabin. And if the reports come to fruition from what we've heard, this is where he's been holed up now for, now we're not exactly sure as many days as we heard earlier reports that this could be where he has been for the last several days, since last Thursday, holed up in this same cabin.
It could be that he was in this cabin. It could also be that this is where he got cornered today, too, because we do know, and I was told by authorities up here, that he did carjack a white Dodge pickup truck from a man, and that was what they were looking for when we rolled up on this scene out here. And so this could have been where he crashed that truck and maybe ran into this cabin for cover. Of course, it's always a possibility that this is where he had his cache of weapons as well, so he could have been headed back here. All of that will be sorted out in the aftermath during this investigation.
And Carter, tell us, what is the position right now? What's the posture of the law enforcement people on the front line right there right now? Are they still on high alert?
You know, there are some people having conversations with each other. It does not seem like they are. The tension is easing as we speak. As the minutes pass, things are calming, and I think you can only assume that everyone is feeling here that there really is no chance that anyone inside of that cabin could survive this. So they're feeling a little bit safer, but still they're taking all precautions. But at this point, you know, I do see some firefighters walking up to talk with some of the officers. And I do see some of the SWAT officers that are right in front of the cabin themselves that have now lowered their weapons, so they don't seem to be standing at the ready like they were just a few minutes ago.
And Carter, didn't you tell us earlier today that after you spoke to a couple of the officers that were near you, when you arrived on this scene and frankly all hell was breaking loose, and you had a chance to talk to them, didn't they tell you that they believed that in this cabin that is burning right now, they had their man?
Yes. No one that I spoke with had actually put their eyes on Christopher Dorner. But from everything that we had heard, he had been chased to this cabin and cornered in this cabin. And everyone that I spoke with out here was sure that that was Christopher Dorner inside this cabin. And they were all very hopeful that this would come to some sort of a resolution today without any more loss of life. Of course, now we know that one sheriff's deputy did pass from his injuries from this gunfire. And you know, I believe now, looking back on what happened when I rolled up on this scene, I believe he was shot probably about 20 feet from where we pulled over our car, because I can still see weapons and ammunition scattered on the street and a bulletproof vest lying on the ground. And I was told by one of the other deputies as he came back that bulletproof vest was covered with blood.
Now, you said earlier, Carter, that this cabin was surrounded with SWAT vehicles. Are they still in place, in the same place?
Yes, they're still in the same place right now. I can only see one of these armored vehicles, and there is one person in a position of cover with his weapon still aimed on the cabin itself. There are a few SWAT officers standing behind this vehicle themselves, but their posture now is much calmer. The feeling out here is much less intense than it was just 15 or 20 minutes ago.
You know, you almost wonder if they're just going to let it burn itself out, let it burn to the ground, or if they will at some point try to extinguish and see what's inside. It's just really incredible to see all of this unfold and to have answers, which I'm sure you will get for us as time goes, just why they chose to do what they did in terms of take this particular tack.
Right, right. And again, we don't know how this fire started. We do know, though, that it did start moments after several rounds of tear gas were fired at the cabin. I heard those canisters being fired at the cabin. I could see the tear gas rising from the cabin. I watched the smoke color change from green to white to the black smoke as the fire engulfed this cabin. So we do know that about the time that this cabin did go up in flames was literally moments after these tear gas canisters were fired at the cabin.
Carter, at this point in time, because you've described hearing ammunition rounds going off, presumably from inside the cabin caused by the fire, are you hearing any more of that at this point in time? Because that would certainly keep law enforcement and firefighters away from the cabin as well.
Yes, and that's a big concern. Although I've been told by deputies on the scene that the way ammunition explodes in a fire is less dangerous than it is when it's fired out of a gun, because when it's in a gun, the shell casing is contained inside the gun and the bullet goes forward. When the ammunition is just sitting there and gets hot and explodes, it explodes in all the directions, but without the force directed in one location. So it's less likely that we would be hit by any shrapnel from these exploding munitions. But again, no one's taking any chances right now, and you can understand why they don't necessarily want to move in. You know, we've got the fire department here. They're observing this fire as it burns. We can only presume that they're watching to make sure that it doesn't spread, but they're certainly not going to move in here until they know they're absolutely safe.
Well, you know, I guess that would underscore why we saw so many vehicles coming down off the mountain about, I guess, 30 minutes or so ago. We've been watching this for the past, ever since the noon hour when this was first happened, Carter, and we were trying to surmise from our own theories as to what possibly could be happening. And now it looks like it's just going to play itself out, or this fire is going to be allowed to burn out to make sure that everyone on board is safe before they make a move or even try to put this out and see if there is possibly a body inside.
Yeah, and now as I look at the structure of this building, it is still engulfed in flames, but the structure itself is beginning to collapse. I can still see that stone chimney standing there in the middle of these flames, but again, the wooden structure around it is now beginning to collapse lower.
Carter, have any more personnel arrived on the scene? We know that the firefighters arrived and they were held back right next to you almost. Have any more personnel come into that area waiting for this fire to subside so they can get in there, or is it still just the frontline officers who were there backed up by the firefighters who have been sitting there now for a while?
Yeah, since we have been speaking for the last half hour or so, the only people who have arrived on scene have been firefighters from the San Bernardino County Fire Department. There are two vehicles, a battalion captain and a engine that's here. But other than that, no one else has arrived on scene. I am seeing some of the SWAT officers beginning to walk away from the fire now. Their guns now lowered, a much more calm demeanor among these officers as they walk away from the scene, it appears. And one would hope that we would be accurate on this speculation, but this may be, in fact, over.
Yeah, Carter, you wonder how much time would elapse before they actually went in and tried to see what was left. If there was a body inside to actually close off this investigation. Of course, then they would have to identify the remains, I would imagine, unless they had some other way to actually interpret whether that this was Christopher Dorner or not.
And at this point, looking at the intensity of these flames, I think it's safe to assume that it's going to be some time before we get some actual confirmation of who was inside that cabin, because they're probably going to have to do some dental record checks on this, maybe some DNA tests, because certainly anyone who may have been inside this fire is not going to be recognizable afterwards.
Yeah.
That really adds even more then to this story. Even if we thought that this could possibly be the end, to be certain will still take some time. The officers, the firefighters and officers have to go in and see if there is indeed a body in there and then make some identification of the remains. So we could still have quite a bit of time before we know.
Right, and one would assume, considering the threats that were made against these police officers and their families, until they know for sure that they've got their man here, you would assume that the police are not going to let their guard down, considering the way this has played out over the last few days.
Well, the way this thing has played out, Carter, Pat and I have talked about this numerous times. It's just the twists and the turns and the unexpected events in this entire scenario have been just absolutely mind-boggling. Just just when you're amazed and you think you can't be amazed or astonished any longer, it happens to you again and again and again. And the way the events unfolded today, and with you right in the middle of it, certainly was astonishing as well.
And now as I'm watching the demeanor of these officers, as every minute passes, things seem to be calming down. Those officers that I told you were guarded behind the armored vehicle just a few minutes ago have also put their weapons down now. They are no longer pointed at the cabin. They're standing there watching it burn. I see a couple people smoking cigarettes. So it appears the mood has calmed quite a bit from the intense situation that we had just a few hours ago.
So, Carter, but you still don't see any personnel using fire hoses or extinguishers trying to get those flames completely out?
They have not moved since they last stopped in this position. They are just standing guard as we watch this fire burn on.
So, Carter, with the exception of the stone chimney, which you described as being in the middle of this structure, are all of the walls down, all of the roofs are down, all of the eaves, all of everything?
Let me try and get up on top of it. Bumper here so I can get a better look. And, you know, I can see inside to the structure now. I don't see a roof anymore. I told you before that I saw some of the framing. There's very little of that left standing right now. It appears that this entire structure is engulfed in flames. That is our part, sir. Yes.
All right, Carter, if you could stand by and possibly listen to this press conference that we are about to join in progress right now.
Any attempt of communication with him?
I'm not sure.
Did it appear he had any body armor?
I don't know. They didn't indicate that he did.
Is there any speculation that the suspect probably fled the area before he caught the house on fire?
I don't know what kind of speculation is going on there at the scene. At about 12:20, deputies that were actively working the search for Christopher Dorner received a report on Clubview Drive from the reporting party said that their vehicle had been stolen from their home. They also reported that the subject who stole their vehicle matched the description of Christopher Dorner. Immediately, all available law enforcement on the mountain and other units from down the hill began to surround the area. Our air units were up. They located the vehicle. The suspect that was driving the vehicle abandoned the vehicle and fled on foot into the forest. He barricaded himself in a cabin.